Channel 98 is your channel. If you have an idea for a program, want to host your own talk show, or submit a film, we're here to get your content on television. On Channel 22, we bring you live and replay coverage of government meetings and other town updates. A third channel, Blue Hawk Media, is operated by SAU 16 and can be found on Channel 13, with all your school sports, events, and meetings. You can watch Exeter TV online at exeternh.tv, Apple TV, and on Roku. Find us on social media for extra content. Subscribe to our YouTube channel and hit the bell to get notified about live streams and new content. Tune in to our platforms every other Friday to watch the Exeter Biweekly Report, with recaps of recent events, updates from town departments, and messages from nonprofits in your area. If you head to our website, exeternh.tv, we invite you to sign up to our newsletter to receive monthly updates about new content, upcoming meetings, and more. We'd like to thank you for taking the time to watch Exeter TV and hope that you tune in to our other content as well.
to our October Conservation Commission meeting. We'll start with an introduction of our members. I'm Andrew Koff. I'm the chair of the Conservation Commission. Maybe we'll go down to Julie.
Julie Gilman, Select Board Rep to the Commission.
I am Connor Madison.
Trevor Matera.
Nick Campion.
Bill Campbell.
All right, thanks for everybody for coming here tonight and wearing masks. We know that we don't have the hybrid option right now, but this is the best we can do given the circumstances. So thanks for being respectful of the mask wearing and all being together here. So we have 3 different permits we're going to go through. The Rose Farm permit will be third. Before we get to those action items, is there anyone here who has a public comment not associated with one of those projects? Now is the time. Okay. Seeing there aren't any, we'll move to our first action item. It's a wetland and shoreland conditional use permit application for approximately 6,000 square feet of temporary wetland buffer impacts and 10,000 square feet of temporary shoreland buffer impacts associated with utilities right away for Eversource. There's no direct wetland impacts, at least not through this process. So I don't need to say any more about this, but I believe we have some presentation here.
Yep. Okay.
If you want to just introduce yourself.
Yeah, sure. Good evening. My name is Chris Wilkes. I work for VHB, and I am completing environmental permitting and compliance for this project on behalf of Eversource. So what you have in front of you tonight is proposed utility maintenance project that Eversource intends to complete starting in November and probably working through a good part of the winter, December, January, maybe wrapping up in February. The work itself is along an existing H141 115 kV transmission line right-of-way. They're doing work as well on the A126 line, but there's no structure work on the A126 line this year proposed in Exeter. They are working in 4 or 5 other towns along the seacoast on these same lines, replacing structures. So for this work, we're looking at 3 structure replacements. They are located sort of a isolated tract of land between Route 101 westbound and Epping Road, which is New Hampshire Route 27. If you're at all familiar with that location, there is a floodplain wetland associated with the Little River that flows through that section of the right-of-way. VHB went out and delineated wetlands this growing season, and so we put together this plan set. I think you guys have copies of. Shows the Little River and the associated floodplain wetland that's connected to it. So the structures themselves are currently wood 2-pole H-frame structures. You've probably seen those before. They're 2 wood poles with a brace across the top. Those will be replaced with weathered steel, which is the new standard, engineering standard. Same configuration, 2-pole with the brace across the top. The structures themselves will be replaced relatively in kind, so within 10 feet of the existing footprints, with the exception of one of the structures, which is actually making a more significant move. It is structure 176, and it actually seen as a benefit in this location because we're actually pulling that structure out of the wetland in the floodplain, and we're repositioning it in a small area of upland closer to Epping Road. So that, I think that structure move is about 120 feet or so from the existing location, but again, seen as a benefit. If you've seen this work be done before, it's pretty standard. Eversource does it all the time. They have, select contractors that they use that are very familiar with this work. They implement best management practices for utility maintenance, which involves, preventing direct and indirect impacts to wetlands through the implementation of erosion controls, timber matting for access and work area staging. So for this location, I'll just walk through the structures themselves. If you have the plan in front of you, structure 177 is going to be accessed directly off of Route 101 westbound. So that structure, and we're doing that to avoid having to traverse across that large floodplain wetland and over the Little River. We looked at that in the field. It's very, variable water levels in there and frequent inundation, and it just wasn't feasible to try and cross that. It's much easier to come off the highway, direct upland access to the structure. You can see the structure is going to be replaced pretty much in kind. The box around the structure is a approximate staging work pad area. It's 100 by 100 feet. It's pretty much what's required for the equipment and the crews to stage while they replace that structure. We have some erosion controls shown on the downslope side between the work pad and the wetland. Those will be implemented prior to the start of construction there. We're also coordinating with DOT on this location, obviously coming off the highway. So we're working with them, going through the proper routes to get approvals for highway access, traffic control plans, and all that. So that's in process right now. We're hoping to have that wrapped up within the next month or so. On the other side, the other two structures, 176 and 175, will be accessing off of Epping Road, just coming right off the road. On the western side, there's an existing sort of opening there that was an older access road that we plan to use again. It's pretty well established, and so crews will come right off the western shoulder to access structure 176. You can see structure 176, the existing structure, which is in the middle of the wetland, and which is the gray point. So what we're going to do is timber mat into that structure and remove it. Typically for structure removals in wetlands, the process is cutting the structure at the ground surface flat with the ground, and then just removing everything above ground but leaving the pole butts in the ground, so we limit disturbance. So we're not ripping up those structures, generating a lot of sediment movement. So those are usually left in the ground. So that would be the plan there. We have a smaller work pad shown for that location, a 50 by 50, which, because we don't need to replace right at that location, typically we can reduce our footprint when we go in just to remove a structure. So we did that again to also reduce our impacts within the wetland. And then structure 176, the new one, is, you can see that it's in red just to the east there, and right on the same alignment as the overhead line, obviously, but within an area of upland. And we will need 100 by 100 work pads surrounding that structure. So you can see where that work pad intersects wetlands. The plan is to put timber mats in so that we create a nice flat surface and we avoid rutting up, disturbing soils within the wetland edge. Are you guys familiar with timber matting? Okay.
Yeah.
So, they use that to distribute weight, reduce rutting, reduce ground disturbance. It works pretty well. Given the time of year too, it's really beneficial to do this work outside the growing season. And with mats, we're anticipating that, come next growing season, early spring, summer, that vegetation in there is naturally going to rebound on its own. That's, just given the time of year we're working and the BMPs we plan to implement. So then we have structure 175 on the other side of Epping Road. That one is in wetland and it will be replaced in kind. We don't have a lot of room there, as you can see, to move that structure anywhere. That wetland is quite expansive. There's another structure, well, several structures that are in the wetland, and we're bound by Epping Road right there. So it's going to be simply coming off the eastern shoulder of Epping Road, setting up the 100 by 100 foot work pad and replacing that structure in kind, and then removing the mats and demobilizing from there. So, with that said, we have, as you mentioned at the onset, our impacts are approximately 7,415 square feet of direct temporary wetland impact. And that's as a result of the placement of timber matting required to access and stage equipment during the replacement of structure 176. And then additionally, 6,090 square feet of temporary impact is proposed within the associated combined 40-foot buffer of wetland, of two of the wetlands, wetlands W31 and W32. And then in terms of the shoreland zone, the shoreline protection district, we are looking at 10,000 square feet of temporary impact within the 300-foot shoreline buffer of the Little River, and associated contiguous floodplain wetland. And that's due to the placement of construction work pads surrounding that structure. And then additionally, the installation of new structure 176 will result in approximately 714 square feet of temporary impact within that 300-foot buffer zone. So, I'm happy to go through anything else if you guys have questions, but hopefully that details the work. You guys have a good idea of what's planned.
Are there, what does anyone, Bill?
This is similar to what you did in the Rains Farm when you crossed, replaced some transmission poles there last year, I think it was. Same kind of mattings and whatnot.
Yeah, I wasn't involved in that one. I don't think if it was last year, but assuming it was a structure.
Year before.
Okay, yeah, assuming it was structure replacement work, it would have been the same approach.
What about the height? Do they stay the same from the wood to the steel?
The structure heights, it's in the narrative here, but they're increasing just a bit from anywhere from 5 to 20 feet in height, and that's just to match, current engineering standards, gaining that vertical clearance that we need from the ground. Also, we're dealing with a highway crossing here, so structure 177 is, from there it spans over 101, so that structure in general is typically higher, because just so we're meeting the safety requirements of the DOT right away.
Thank you.
Yep.
Are there known invasive species in these areas? And I believe there's a management plan.
There is, yeah. So with any right-of-way, typically you have to deal with invasive plants. I believe there are some here, and let me just take a look. But yeah, so we indicated purple loosestrife and glossy buckthorn when we did the field work. So Eversource has their own standards for trying to reduce the spread of those plants. Typically that requires the contractor to first deliver clean equipment to the site so that, they're not coming in from another site in another town with sediment or seed stock on their tracks. They're delivering clean equipment, and then usually is when they transport the equipment off-site or from one location to the next, there's a requirement to visually inspect the equipment, make sure that they're cleaning off their tracks, that they're not, they're reducing the potential for spreading that. So, and for here, since we're in such an isolated spot, they're probably going to be coming in, staying in that location, and then, demobilizing in the end and taking the equipment out of there. So, again, we're working in winter, so hopefully that helps reduce. We're not in the growing season. We're past the flowering period, all that. So I think there may be snow on the ground. So hopefully that helps for this one. But they do have their own kind of protocols to try and reduce the spread of those species. So.
Okay. Are there any other general questions? Okay, I think there's sort of three things as far as I understand this. We have direct wetland impacts.
Yep.
And that you have to talk to DES. And
Yeah.
you have a whole separate process, and we're not involved specifically in that process tonight.
Yeah, and I forgot to mention that. I apologize. So we are, because we have the direct temporary impact, we'll be pursuing a permitting with DES for this work, and that's going to go through the statutory permit by notification for utility maintenance,
Right.
which is its own streamlined process for this type of work. And that's an application that goes in. The DES has 5 days for review approval. As part of that application, we need to coordinate with the Natural Heritage Bureau and Fish and Game on rare plants and animals. And then if there are any priority resource areas, then we also need to coordinate with DES to make sure that they don't have any concerns with impacts to those locations. So in terms of rare plants and animals, we did correspond already with the Heritage Bureau. In their report, they did identify a couple turtle species and the northern black racer. So they had Blanding's turtle, spotted turtle, and wood turtle, as well as the black racer identified. And that was for the overall project footprint, which includes other towns. But certainly with an inundated wetland here, there's potential for habitat for turtles. And black racers are, known to be within existing rights of way in this part of the state. So,
And that's in the 175 prime wetland impact area mostly?
it's generally kind of tied to, now there's no direct records of these species within the project footprint at all.
Yeah.
But what the Heritage Bureau does is give you a list of anything within about a quarter mile, I believe it is. So there's records within the vicinity, and that's why they popped up on the report. So there wasn't any plants identified or exemplary natural communities. So with that, we did correspond with Fish and Game to try and address any concerns. And I do have their documentation here. Essentially, we said that, we're going to be working in late fall, winter. And so that, again, that alleviates a lot of concern in terms of what's going to be out on the right of way. The species should be hibernating around that time. And also Eversource usually implements a sort of a pre-construction meeting with the contractor where we go through training protocol on rare plants and animals, and we distribute Fish and Game, turtle and snake flyers. We make sure they're aware of the species, what they look like, and then if there's anything that's identified or encountered, they're supposed to immediately report that to us, and then we take it from there. So we have pretty robust reporting procedure. So with that coupled with the winter construction, Fish and Game basically signed off on the work with not much concern for this location. So I've got that in writing here if you guys want to see that. I'm happy to share that.
I'll take your word for it at the moment.
Okay.
Okay, so there's the direct wetland impacts, and that process doesn't involve us because it's a PBN.
Yeah, it's a pretty streamlined process
Right.
these days at DES for that, since they get that this work comes through all the time. So
Okay, so why don't we first tackle the wetland conditional use permit?
Sure.
And that's for the wetland buffer impacts associated with this project, the temporary wetland buffer impacts. We have separate ordinances for the wetland conditional use versus the shoreline conditional use, so we'll do the wetland and then we'll vote on that. And Bill, you're going to be able to vote on this one? Okay. Because Connor has recused himself. And then we'll do the wetland and then the shoreland. So I, just in the interest of time and saving everyone's we can go through there's 8 different conditions which you've responded to in your memo. The first one is that the proposed use is permitted in the underlying zoning district. Yes, we can move on. There's no alternative design which does not impact a wetland or wetland buffer, which has less of a detrimental impact on the wetland or wetland buffer is feasible. To the extent, I mean, if you want to answer that, it seems like it's been a thoughtful design. I don't see any obvious ways that this work could be done. Obviously, you have your standard operating procedures that seem to be followed in this case, so.
Yeah, I think we, getting that one structure out of the wetland is, an attempt at reducing our impact there.
Yeah.
Outside of that, just because we're so constrained with the right-of-way limits and there's 2 large expansive wetlands there's really not a good way to avoid,
Okay.
and its existing infrastructure that needs to be maintained. So we do what we can in terms of construction and access to those locations. Like, we're coming off of Route 101, so we're not going to have to traverse fully across that large inundated wetland. So we did think about it through multiple field visits and come up with the best plan. Do we reduce our impacts? But we unfortunately can't avoid them.
Okay. And number 3 is a wetland scientist has provided an impact evaluation that includes the function and values of the wetlands and an assessment of potential project-related impacts. Concluded, to the extent feasible, that the proposed impact is not detrimental to the value and function of the wetlands or the greater hydrologic system.
Yeah, I can speak to that.
You want to, if you speak to that for a minute in terms of functions and values of the wetland.
Yeah, so these wetlands being associated with the Little River, being kind of a larger expansive system that's beyond the right-of-way limits, consisting of dense scrub shrub emergent vegetation, their location within the landscape downslope of 101 and Epping Road. It all offers towards multiple function values that these wetlands hold. So we're talking sediment toxicant retention, nutrient removal, and that's from potential sources off the roadways and existing industrial, commercial, residential development. These wetlands have floodplain or flood capacity because of the Little River and the hydrologic connection to it. We also, with the dense vegetative composition, they offer a variety of wildlife habitat for birds. I've talked about the turtles as well, potential turtle habitat there. And what else? I think that's the principal functions that they hold. However, I think the point here for us is that we don't expect negatively affecting these function and values simply because the impacts are temporary in nature. So we're not proposing any permanent wetland impacts, and it's going to occur over a pretty short duration of time in the winter. So, and we're going to implement best management practices like erosion and sediment controls and timber matting, so that we're hoping to avoid indirect impacts as well. So,
yeah, I think that doing it in the winter is a major benefit for this project.
I'm sorry, what was the timeline again? Can you repeat that?
Project start is going to be early to mid-November, and then probably a duration of several months. And I'm not entirely sure where they're going to start. So like I said, I think they're working in 5 towns, so they may not start in Exeter in November. I'm not entirely sure.
Because this span covers into Brentwood and also into
so we're
Newfield.
working Brentwood, Sandown, Fremont, Exeter, and Stratham, I think. So they've got some ground to cover. So we may not start in Exeter. I'm not entirely sure, but it's the general time frame. So.
Yeah, it's dried out somewhat recently, although it's still fairly wet out there. Okay, so that covers item 3, unless there are any other comments. Given these are temporary impacts, yeah, I don't see an impact to the functions and values overall. Item 4 is that the design, construction, and maintenance of the proposed use will, to the extent feasible, minimize detrimental impacts on the wetland or wetland buffer. I feel like that's been addressed in your comments. Item 5 is that the proposed use will not create a hazard to individual or public health, safety, and welfare due to the loss of wetland, the contamination of groundwater, or other reasons. We're not here to address the health and safety factors related to electrical work, so I don't know if you want to talk to that one, but I don't see any issues regarding these timber mats. There's very little disturbance of the ground itself.
Yeah, I think with the BMP's proposed, we're really going to limit the potential for any water quality impacts. Again, it's a short duration project in the winter, so we already got that on our side, but the timber matting, the erosion controls really prevent the potential water quality impacts from sediment transport during snow, rain events. I kind of approach the question too in terms of public health and safety is, it's an ongoing effort by PSNH to update deficient infrastructure that is due for replacement, that in turn, benefits the public through more reliability on the transmission line system. So I'm kind of on that side of that question.
Okay, thank you. Item 6.
I was going to ask one question on that.
Yep.
You said, and maybe you've covered this, and I missed it, but you said the letter says that afterwards you come back and restore it, and then DES has to approve that and check it out. Do we get any approval of that, or is it all through you guys once we approve this?
Yeah, so
because at Rains Farm, we tacitly improved it or checked it out after you left. It was good, but there was no formal approval, but
Sure.
at least that was on our property, so we went and looked and said, what did you guys do?
Okay.
But
Yeah, I think for this work, the other side of the picture for making sure things are being done in compliance with the town, the local permitting requirements in the state is that Eversource usually has a consultant hired on board for construction that goes out and does weekly inspections of the line while the work is being done. So that's somebody like myself or a colleague who will go out and meet with the contractor, make sure the work is being done in compliance with the permit approvals and the best management practices. And then, we write a report and that gets issued to Eversource with photos so that if anything comes up that could be a potential violation or a concern, it's raised to Eversource right away, and then they typically will reach out to the contractor and make sure it's addressed. So that is the plan here in terms of restoration.
yeah,
So that is a component of that oversight. So at the end of the project, we'll go out, we'll meet with the contractor as they start removing mats, and we will make sure that, things are looking good from our perspective, that they're not leaving ruts or exposed soils behind. They're grading, smoothing over areas as needed. They're applying, straw mulch, which is basically temporary stabilization for the winter. And then we'll probably follow up with a spring inspection once things start greening up to make sure that, everything is coming back and looks good, and that additional promotion of vegetation isn't needed, like seeding and, additional straw and stuff like that. So I think that's the plan here. You guys are certainly, like Rains Farm, if there's an interest, out there, then, there's nobody stopping you from driving by, I guess, to take a look at that in the spring, but.
Well, we have particular interest in that property as it has a lot of recreational value.
Yeah,
This particular property is not as.
Yeah, and I worked on that piece of that project, I think it was 2 years ago or so that they did that work, and I know you guys have a parking area there and a lot of recreation, so.
And agricultural use of the property, not to mention. So. Okay, that was good. Any other thoughts on that one? Okay. Item 6 doesn't really apply. It deals with proposed increasing wetland buffers elsewhere on the site. So that's not really applicable to this situation. Item 7, in cases where the proposed use is temporary or where construction activities disturb areas adjacent to the immediate use, the applicant has included a restoration proposal for revegetating any disturbed area within the buffer, with the goal to restore the site nearly as possible as to the original grade and condition following construction. That has been addressed to my satisfaction through this conversation in the application. Okay. And number 8, the last one is required permits shall be obtained from DES and other agencies, which I believe that they have.
Yeah, we're in the process of getting those permits from DES. We haven't physically received them yet, but because it's such a short turnaround time, we don't anticipate any issues to get those by early November. So.
Okay. Is there any, do we have any other comments, questions on the wetland conditional use? Are there any public comments? Anyone would like to comment on this project? I guess seeing none, I feel that we've reviewed this. I'll make a motion that we've reviewed this application and have no objection to the approval of the conditional use permit as proposed.
Second.
Okay, that was seconded. Any additional comments? Seeing none. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All those opposed? We have none. The motion passes 4-0. And I'll note for the record that Connor Madison abstained. So that's the wetland side. The shoreland side, now we have, it is a shoreland due to the little river. And there is one main slice within the 177 pole, the one off 101 is within the shoreland buffer. All 10,000 square feet of that, because it's 100 by 100. Work zone. And then is there another little wedge?
There's another little wedge.
And I don't quite understand how that works, but.
Well, so yeah, I mean, it's a little funky there because we have both wetland and shoreland buffer in play around that new structure. So for simplicity, I think we went with the shoreland buffer, but it's really combined.
Right.
But it's just how you break that out is subjective to, I guess, anyone can do it differently. So that's why we have that little sliver is, that which is inside that green circle actually is what that is 714 square feet. And that's because too, in speaking with Krista Murphy at the town, we buffered off of the edge of the wetland and not the little river because it was in your ordinance, there's language that you're supposed to buffer off the contiguous, if there's a contiguous bordering wetland, you would buffer off the edge of that instead of the actual center line of the channel, or the top of bank. So that's why that was included there, because we're going off of the wetland edge too. So. Right.
But for the most part here, we're talking about the work area around pole 177. That's accessed. It's adjacent to 101 west. It probably will be visible from the highway, as it's fairly close. But it is due to the proximity to the wetland surrounding the river. Is there someone, is that a door?
That's the elevator.
Oh, that's the elevator. Sorry. Due to the proximity to the wetland surrounding the river, it's within the shoreland. Welcome, Don.
Okay.
Thanks for coming. We have our alternate member, Don Clement. Joining us. It's
Hi there.
7:38 for the record. So is there anything else, or should we go through the conditional use permit for the shoreland? Do we have any comments on this? It's essentially all the same things, but we do have separate criteria, so we kind of have to go through it separately. Okay, so the first criteria is the proposed use will not detrimentally affect the surface water quality of the adjacent river or tributary, or otherwise result in unhealthful conditions.
Yeah, so the answer basically, I think that we put forth in that is that, the structure itself is located entirely within upland, and that we do plan on putting an erosion control line of silt sock along the edge of the workspace, downslope towards the wetland area. So that should eliminate, we don't have any direct impacts there. And let's see, what else do we have?
Because this is the 150-foot shoreline buffer, is that right?
I believe it is a 300-foot.
This is the 300-foot.
Yeah, it's right.
Yeah.
300.
Yeah, it's the 300-foot. So you're well outside of the wetland.
Well outside, yeah. We're probably, it looks to be, just based on the plans, over 100 feet away from the wetland edge. We're entirely within upland. We're not, doing any additional vegetation, clearing or widening the right of way in this location. And really, think about the relocation of structure 176 is also seen as a benefit to, we're taking away that impact, and then any future maintenance that needs to be done by not having to put timber mats in that wetland again to get out to it, to maintain it. So I think we address that in this criteria as well.
Yeah. Okay. The second criteria is that the proposed use will discharge no wastewater on site other than that normally discharged by domestic wastewater disposal systems, and will not involve on-site storage or disposal of hazardous or toxic waste as herein defined. This doesn't particularly apply to this situation. Normally these are, residential development type questions. Other than sort of storage and refueling of equipment. I'm sure you have BMPs in place regarding.
Yep. Yeah. So, Eversource has their own, their safety protocols for refueling and storage of material, carrying spill kits and every piece of equipment and vehicle that's there to respond to anything that might occur. Refueling in upland areas only, preferably over an impervious surface. Not staging or leaving equipment in wetlands overnight. Report, and then all the reporting procedures if something happens is, immediately stop work, try and contain the spill as best as you can, and call Eversource, and then go through that reporting procedure, which is documentation of the quantity of the spill, did it reach the ground surface, potential excavation of any contaminated soil, photos and so on. So, occasionally happens, not often, but the idea is they're prepared if it does. So.
Yeah. Okay. The proposed use will not result in undue damage to spawning grounds or other wildlife habitat.
Yeah, so structure 177 and 176, we're not proposing any impacts to spawning grounds. There's no direct impacts to the banks or the bed of the Little River that are proposed. And then in terms of wildlife habitat mentioned earlier, coordination with Fish and Game and the Heritage Bureau to address any concerns with the turtles and the snakes. So, implementing the BMPs associated with guidance provided by Fish and Game is the plan there, and doing the work in the winter. So we don't anticipate any impacts.
Okay. The proposed use complies with the use regulations identified in Article 9.3.4, the Exeter Shoreline Protection District Ordinance, use regulations, and all other applicable sections of this article. I believe this has been met. And the last one is the design and construction of the proposed use will be consistent with the intent of the purposes set forth in the Shoreline District. And this is such sort of temporary maintenance of existing structures is a allowed use. Do we have any other comments on this shoreland impact? Temporary impact, 10,000 square feet for the construction of this new power pole? No. Okay, seeing none, I'll vote that we move to, we've reviewed the application. We don't have any objection to the shoreline conditional use permit as it's been submitted.
I'll second it.
Okay. Any other comments? Seeing none, I will move to vote. All those in favor say aye. 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 All those who oppose say nay. None. Seeing that, the motion passes.
Great. Thanks for your time.
Don, you voted on?
I did.
Okay, thank you. So Don voted, that would be 5-0. It passed. Okay, thank you for your time.
Hey, thank you guys.
And we will, I guess, follow up with a memo to the planning board for recommending with this.
Great.
Yep.
Thank you.
I just got back from experience on soccer games.
The end of the month, okay, probably be, later this week.
It's the reason.
Okay. All right. Up next, we have the dredge and fill, the wetlands. Hold on, I'm looking at the wrong thing. We have a standard dredge and fill application for prime wetland impact resulting from the prime wetland restoration at 32 Charter Street. And tonight we have Jim Gove
Yes, I'm
presenting
here.
on this yet again. Good to see you, Jim.
Good to see you. For the record, my name is Jim Gove with Gove Environmental Services, and even though Mr. Walden is listed as being here, I just got a text from him. He's just flown into Charlotte, so I don't think he's going to be here.
Okay.
So I
Yep.
think I will do the presentation.
Okay, Jim, just seeing that we have a lot to cover tonight,
Yep.
and we've discussed, and just for the audience, we've discussed, I'm not trying to cut you off
I would
or
love to
anything.
be cut off.
But we have,
Please cut me off.
this is the fourth
Yes.
meeting that Jim
Yes.
has presented on this.
Yes.
We have discussed a lot of this at quite some length.
Okay.
Yes.
So if you want to make your comments brief.
My comments will be very brief. Back in July 15th, 2021, you recommended approval of CUP application that in fact, but we should have a planting plan, a restoration plan. That is provided in the packet by Ironwood, and it's fairly extensive, includes a provision in there for removal of any invasive species encountered, and that's it.
Okay, all right. For those who don't know, this is an interesting project. There's a lot of refuse in a wetland. This development, as part of the development, will be removing an extensive amount of that refuse that is in a prime wetland as part of a larger building. The building project will be in the upland portion outside of the buffer for the most part. There's some minor buffer impacts that we've discussed at a previous date. This is solely a comments regarding a DES wetland permit for temporary direct impacts, similar to our last in that they're temporary, but all you're doing is removing. So I guess the major concerns with that are rutting with machinery, because you are going to need some machinery in there.
Yeah, we're going to essentially try to keep the minimum amount of machinery going into the actual wetland itself. We're going to try to basically just pull whatever material we can out of there. Anything that's disturbed, we're going to reseed with a native wetland seed mix. And there is a fairly extensive restoration plan of the outside the wetland of the actual buffer itself, which has been put together by Ironwood. So yes, we are going to significantly just try to do no harm to the actual wetland itself, with the exception of just strictly removing the debris that has been placed there over the years.
And I don't know where you are in terms of other approvals for this project, but is it going to happen this winter? Do you have an estimated window that this work would be done?
My expectation is that they will want to start work as soon as we receive the approval from DES Wetlands. I believe that there's no need for an alteration train because the site's too small. But given the fact it's a major impact project, it will have to be reviewed by the Army Corps of Engineers, and so we'll have to also get that approval. I don't see these approvals coming until in December at best. If in fact there can be some work done perhaps outside of the buffer, or just in the areas we know that old house is going to have to be removed, right? The old sheds will have to be removed. But I don't actually want to be in there trying to do a lot of removal with frost in the ground, because my concern is that we'll cause more rutting and more disturbance in the wetlands if we're trying to fight with the frost at the same time. So this work, I can see some of this work for the structures to be put in, but as far as this work is concerned, I prefer to do that after the frost gets out of the ground.
Like not during a frozen ground condition?
Not during frozen ground conditions, right.
Because of the ripping out of...
Yeah, I'm very concerned that, if you start going in there and just trying to even pull stuff out, and you got dealing with ice and everything else, you're going to rip out a lot more. And because we know this is a prime wetland, we also know that the fact is that it's going to probably not just be saturated, but inundated at that time. And that's just not a good time to be trying to remove that debris, because I can just see us, as we start to pull that debris out, start ripping out more vegetation than we need to. I mean, I'm really looking at just trying to snake that stuff out with very little disturbance, very little soil disturbance. That's really what my goal is.
Right, how achievable that goal is.
Right.
Is the question. I guess now is sort of the time to do it, but that's not going to work out for you.
I don't think it is. I mean, it's possible, given the fact that this is just a very straightforward thing, that we've already contacted DES about the prime wetland, redesignation issue, that we've had, I think we've had like 2 different pre-application meetings. It very well could go fast. I mean, and if it goes fast, that's great, because then we can get in, so.
Okay. In terms of like timber matting and that type of, do you use like mud mats or there?
We will right next to the wetland itself. Again, I don't want to go into that wetland with equipment, okay? We'll reach in and get it out, or we'll reach in with the excavator with a chain on it, have a guy in there just chain up and pull the stuff out. But I do not want to see any excavators in the actual wetland. We'll just work from the edges, and yes, we'll mat those areas if they're soft. We'll mat those areas, but we aren't going to go in the wetland and actually have excavators and things like that in the wetland trying to get that stuff
and a lot of it probably is just like a mini, like a small.
I think so.
A small. I mean, some of the stuff is bigger than other stuff, but
right. But it's not real substantial. In other words,
it isn't.
It's not like we're dealing with like real structures that got built and like have a pad, a concrete pad or something like that. No, we don't have that. We have basically stuff that was just dumped there, or backed in there, or something like that. So, I feel like we can do a good job there without ripping up too much.
Okay. Do we have other comments?
Yes, excuse me. Jim, is your plan to take all of the stuff out of the wetlands that's in there, and the prime wetlands, before you start any other part of the project? Is that is that going to be done and concluded before you actually start construction, or site work for the?
I think there's some of the site work I can see being done before we get there, just because of the fact that if you recall going in there on the site walks, that we have a constraints as to getting into the site. Remember, we've got those buildings that are close in there and everything else. I think in order to get the equipment in, we're going to have to at least remove part of that house, if not all that old house, in order to be able to get in there. Because if you remember the constraints of trying to get in there, it's very narrow getting in there. So.
Okay. Thank you.
Any other comments?
I do love a good restoration. It's going to be nice to see all that junk pulled out of there.
Yeah, I agree. It was when I first went there, I just looked at it and said, "Oh, what the?" So I admit it was a little shocking when I first got. And the interesting thing is they've actually cleaned up some of it, not in the wetlands, but along the edges. It still looks awful, but yeah.
Okay. So again, we're here to recommend any conditions we would like to see in the state wetland permit for this. I know we talked about the restoration plan for the buffer and the wetlands plant, the buffer, or the plantings in the buffer.
Yep.
You've said there is a restoration plan
There
that's
is.
part of this. I think that's really the key.
Yeah, and you
component.
actually have these recommendations on the CUP application. We'd be fine with you, because we've already addressed them in this package. We'd be
Right.
fine having you add those as the conditions of recommendation to the state, those same ones. would
Oh,
be
the
fine.
same ones that we recommended.
Absolutely, absolutely, we're good with that, yep. You had
Okay.
a good
Can find that
list
maybe.
there. So yeah, we'd be happy with that.
Okay. So that was, well, we talked about invasive species control and management.
Yeah, trees and shrubs at the density required, invasive species control and management, and restoration planting monitoring for 2 years, and manage adaptively for plant success. So yeah, if in fact we drop below 70%, we're fine with all those recommendations. We think they're good recommendations.
Okay. And for the plantings in the wetland, is there the wetland mix?
It's going to be a wetland mix. We're not going to physically plant shrubs
No.
in there.
No,
Yes,
no.
we're just going to do a wetland mix
A
because
seed mix.
exactly. Yep.
Okay.
Yep.
And that's a standard
Yes.
DES, so I don't even think we need to
Yep.
call that out.
Yep. That's a standard. Yep.
Are there any other things we could, I guess I'm okay with, we will end up writing a letter to, I guess, Evan Lewis, the Wetlands Bureau, regarding our discussion and saying we have whatever we decide. So we could include those in our letter. If there's anything else we want to include. Don?
Just a question. This prime wetland is kind of directly behind the proposed units. After we do the cleanup and the restoration, is there I don't know if it's a good idea maybe to put some signage up there that delineates this as an example of a prime wetland, and, you know,
Oh yeah.
talk about how fragile it is and how
Oh, yeah.
important it is to the entire environment in the Little River, the complex.
That would be
Some
fine.
kind of signage.
Yeah. Whatever
Delineate
is
that.
best.
I mean, I'd like to see
Yeah.
that.
No, we're fine with that.
Yeah.
Yep.
And the other thing is that, I know you're gonna go through a great restoration process, I'm sure. And I know we probably did this before, it's been a while, that this project's come before the various town boards. Concerned again about future contamination from the project runoff, in terms of especially nitrogen and salt. The project itself, I know we're not talking about the wetland restoration right now, but is the project itself going to try to mitigate and prevent those pollutants from migrating to the prime wetland?
Yeah.
I'm sure it's in the package.
It is.
A year ago.
It is in the package.
Okay.
Yes, it is in
I
the
just want to
package.
reaffirm that.
Yes. Yep.
It's great to restore a prime wetland,
Right.
but in 10, 15 years from now, we don't protect it,
Right.
it loses its value.
Yep. Agreed.
Thank you.
Yep.
Yeah, and this is a complicated one. There's actually some impervious surfaces in the buffer that's coming out. So there's
Yep.
this is a real sort of trade-off of a project. There's certainly a lot of good things about the long-term benefits to this wetland through this project. Okay, I don't think we don't have any other thing we need to go through. If anyone wants to make a motion, I mean, I can.
I make the motion that we've reviewed the application and have no objections to the application as proposed.
Bill, do we want to add any of the
Yeah, no,
comments about restoration, signage, and things like that to that motion, or
yeah, we have no objection. Yeah, and maybe we should add
just a question of
conditions.
process?
I thought.
The signage, I like the signage idea, as well as the invasive species control and the restoration planting, as we conditioned. That way we have it in both the buffer that we regulate in the wetland.
That's fine.
Okay, so we'll add those. That's not an easy. Why don't should I amend
I'll accept them in my motion. We haven't seconded it yet.
No.
Okay, well, I'll just for clarity, I'll say we've reviewed the application and recommend the wetland application be approved with the conditions of the signage for the wetland, the invasive species control and management being incorporated into the restoration plan, and that we have restoration plantings that are monitored for a minimum of 2 years and managed adaptively should planting success drop below 70%.
I'll second that.
Okay, thank you. Any other comments before we vote? Okay, all in favor, say aye.
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 All opposed? Okay, the motion passes.
Thanks very much, appreciate it, and you know what, I really appreciate the way you guys worked with us to get this plan into kind of a pretty good shape, so thanks very much.
Thank you, Jim.
That was the fourth meeting on that?
That was the fourth meeting.
He's been here every month.
Jim is here for one thing or another most months. Where's the rest of your crew, Jim? I don't know. Okay. All right, so now we are up to item 3.
Cruising. Let's go.
Item 3 is we have a standard dredge and fill application similar to what we just reviewed. For wetland impacts, they're very different. Sorry to compare. It's a standard dredge and fill application for wetland impacts associated with the construction of a proposed 41-lot residential subdivision and associated infrastructure at tax map 54, lots 5, 6, and 7, and map 63, lot 205. This is the Rose Farm project. We have discussed this project previously. The wetland and shoreline buffer impacts were discussed in July 2018 as part of the conditional use permit and waiver. Here tonight we have Mark Jacobs to discuss.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I recognize a couple of faces from 2018, Mr. Campbell and Mr. Clement.
I was here as well.
You were here as well?
Yeah.
Okay, I'm sorry. So we do have some continuity, thankfully. I've prepared a presentation that Mr. Sharples is trying to upload for me as we speak, but I'll get started in the interim. I prepared a presentation that hopefully provides some background for those of you who weren't part of the process back in 2018. So it won't be, it may not be as complete as back in 2018, but I think it'll provide a good background for you. For the record, Mark Jacobs, certified wetland scientist, certified soil scientist, certified professional in erosion and sediment control. And with me this evening is Kevin Baum, the legal counsel for the applicants. Let's see. Regarding, I'll start with a little land use history, if you will. The site was formerly a brickyard way back in the day. More recently, it was supported commercial greenhouses. And again, I have some visuals that go along with this, but we'll see if we can get set up. I had spoken to Kristen Murphy about that I was bringing a
Yeah, I'm sorry that we'll get this figured out, hopefully.
Yeah, no worries.
Kristen couldn't make it here tonight.
Yeah, no worries.
And we clearly didn't coordinate that perfectly.
Yeah, she told me she had a commitment. That's perfectly understandable. Let's see, the site has also been used residentially over the years as well. There's as many as 9 homes on the property at one time. Some of those, I think, served as employee housing for the greenhouse workers. But there are 5 homes that still remain out there. The site is contaminated. Portions of the site are contaminated with lead and coal ash and solid waste, all of which is proposed to be removed, and I'll elaborate a little more later. Additionally, at the east end of the project is, the west end of the project, there's a 30-inch gas main that bisects the western tip of the site. Regarding existing conditions, the site's approximately 50 acres in size. It's located at the edge of existing urbanized and densely developed, residentially developed area. So, as such, this project is at the edge of that urbanized area. So from a macro perspective, it really doesn't provide much in the way of habitat fragmentation, if you will. Hello. From a micro perspective, maybe I'll wait just a moment if we might be able to get caught up. Thank you.
Is the remote?
It's with keys, up, down, directional arrows.
We don't have a remote.
No remote.
Don't know remote.
I got it.
Okay.
We'll do the analog, we'll go the analog route.
Yeah.
So there's a picture, if you will, circa 1958 of the site. You can see the massive greenhouse operation that existed. The two residential, or some of the residential dwellings that are on the property. I believe those two still exist. Off to the left, you'll notice a smokestack, and there was the packing house and the heating plant for the greenhouses. Behind that, if you will, off to the left, on that slope is where all primarily the coal ash from the heating operation is concentrated. That again is proposed to be removed. And the lead is a function of the, for lack of a better term, caulking, I guess you would say, around the greenhouses. That's where most of the lead that's in the soil out here came from. Again, next slide, please, Kevin. So this is a picture of the overall, the site, 50 acres. if you will. It shows, this is the former greenhouse locations, if you will. Oak Street extension, which comes all the way out to here. The 30-inch gas main I spoke about bisects this portion of the site. The site houses Jailhouse Spring, which I'm sure everybody knows about. It's a local landmark. Actually, I wouldn't even say it's a regional landmark. I know people come from far and wide to get water from Jailhouse Spring, just right about there on the property. There are 4 man-made ponds on the property. This is the second largest of them. This is the largest of them. It's on Norris Brook. Norris Brook actually comes across the site in 2 places and then basically traverses this southern boundary of the site all the way out through here and then out underneath the Boston Maine Railroad tracks, which bound the site to the east. Those are the tracks that the Downeaster train uses, among other entities. 4 ponds. Okay, so this is yet another pond. So you get a pond there. This big pond on Norris Brook. This pond, which is also contaminated with lead and will be dredged for remediation purposes, but the pond will remain after the project is done. And then there's a small pond down in this area of the site as well. Numerous man-made wetlands exist. They probably show up on other plans better, but a bunch of those are right through here, primarily. The property abuts the Henderson Swayze Town Forest from about here over. Has common property line with the town forest. I said it's drained by a perennial stream, again, Norris Brook, primarily right there. This is also an unnamed perennial stream. It's headwaters of which is off-site, above our site, and flows down through the site and then enters Norris Brook and discharges the site beneath the railroad tracks as well. There are a total of 3 intermittent streams. This is one. This is another. And there's a short one right here. That stream is man-made by virtue of, back in the 70s, I believe it was, the homeowner in this location kept horses, needed an area to keep horses, and so they cleared the trees, created a field that changed the runoff characteristics in that area, if you will, increased the rate of runoff, scoured an intermittent channel that flows down over this hill now. Invasive species, you name it, for the most part, they're out there, just about every common invasive species to the area, but the most notable are Japanese knotweed, which is extensive in this area along both sides of the road, and there's a population out here as well. There was a map, we actually delineated and surveyed and prepared a map of all the Japanese knotweed that's on the site. And that's in your packet, the wetlands packet, if you will. Next slide, please, Kevin. So this is an aerial view of the site, if you will. Again, Oak Street extension exists currently. This is Norris Brook condominiums. The industrial park is right over here. The railroad tracks. This is Forest Street and Wadley, right there. Next slide, please, Kevin. This is this is from your GIS system here in Exeter. It's an overlay of the municipal sewer and water infrastructure that exists currently in this area. And again, you can see the dense development, residential development, and you can see this project abuts that. So it sort of, it piggybacks on a lot of existing development. So in terms of, I know the term fragmentation gets used a lot, but in terms of existing development, this project really piggybacks to the degree it can, given that you have this Norse Brook that bisects the site. It piggybacks to a large degree on existing long-time residential development. There are numerous bike trails that traverse the site, and the applicant is dedicated to making sure those stay open for use. And I'll discuss that a little bit more later on in my presentation. Next slide, please, Kevin. This is a slide that shows existing forest cover at the site. Everything in green is basically forested. This is that field I was talking about that was created back in the 70s, I believe. This is all the open area basically that goes along with the greenhouse operations and the existing residential structures that are out there. Next slide, please, Kevin. And this is a slide of all the slopes, 15% or steeper on the project. And overlaid on that, we have added the wetlands in this light colored blue and the proposed development, the proposed road, access road. This is existing Oak Street extension still. So you can see there's some pretty steep slopes, especially adjacent to the Norse Brook corridor here and here. So the proposed project, next slide please, Kevin. Thank you. Then the proposed project is 41 is an open space development of 41 proposed lots and a total of 45 proposed units. This large lot here will have a 5-unit multi-unit building there. Otherwise, everything else is single-family residential homes. The project will be served by municipal water and sewer, where currently there is none out there right now. And, some of the septic systems out there existing are of questionable status, certainly. The project's proposing 6.3 acres of open space, deeded open space to the town. We also have open space in these areas as well as this lot is common open space, totaling another more than 12 acres of additional open space. There will be 5 neighborhood recreation areas spread throughout the project, one of which is adjacent to the jailhouse spring, which we'll be making some improvements there for access and the like. The proposed road is approximately 2,372 feet in length. Next slide, please, Kevin. The primary crossing of Norris Brook. This is a blow up of that crossing. Originally, the project proposed a closed bottom box culvert with stream simulation. We got feedback from your commission, from the planning board. That got changed to a 5 by 12 foot open bottom box culvert. Subsequently, a 5 by 16 foot open bottom box culvert, which was approved under our conditional use permit application back in 2018. The culvert has since been enlarged again since that approval. We are now proposing a 5 foot tall by 24 foot wide box culvert, open bottom box culvert. For a variety of reasons, the 16-foot culvert was more than adequate to pass the 100-year storm. It provided 1.2 times bank full width, but it was our feeling when we would go to construct it, we were still going to be too close to the banks of the Norris Brook, so we expanded the opening, if you will, went to a 24-foot opening to try and avoid impacting the banks of the brook completely. So if you can go to the next slide, Kevin, I think. Yeah, this is a cross-sectional drawing, if you will, of the opening, 24 feet wide, 5 feet tall, 5 feet 9 inches actually. You can see this is the actual channel, and we'll have exposed bank, if you will, a minimum of 6 feet, maximum of 9 feet on that side, and a minimum of 6 feet and a maximum of 16 feet on the other side. The reason for that variability is because the channel's not a straight shot coming down through the culvert, so that width varies. But there'll be an S bench here for wildlife passage on either side of the brook after that culvert is installed. One key point is that we have the luxury of Oak Street Extension allows us access to both sides of the brook to build each footing and install the bridge, sides of the bridge separately, so there will be no temporary crossing, no temporary impacts to Norris Brook to install this bridge. That's key. You don't, it's not often that you have that luxury, but we have that luxury on this site by virtue of existing Oak Street Extension. Next slide, please, Kevin. Okay, this is another overall of the site. Again, Oak Street Extension. This is the proposed new road. I put up this slide to highlight some of the impacts, especially associated with, this is the impact area I was just speaking about, the 5 foot by 24 foot open bottom box culvert crossing Norris Brook. I wanted to speak about these impacts. Again, this pond, these impacts are all associated with the remediation of lead and coal ash and solid waste at the site. These impacts will be permanent. This will be temporary. There's temporary impacts, three different impacts down along the toe of this slope, and those will be restored in place upon completion of the project. But these impacts will be permanent. As will
I was under the impression those weren't part of this.
They're technically not.
Not that you can't talk about them, but
right. The remediation of hazardous waste sort of takes, where it involves wetlands, it takes some precedence over the wetlands permit application. We're not required to factor these into the quantification of impacts for the application fee or for compensatory mitigation, but in full disclosure, they're wetlands and they're not jurisdictional under your local zoning, but they're jurisdictional under the state regulations. Even though again they're all man-made, they're all very low functioning, but they're wetlands nonetheless. And but I felt that it was something people should know about. So. Next slide, please, Kevin. Okay, so there are a number of improvements also to Oak Street Extension. When the planning board approved the project, they had conditions about inspecting and upgrading or replacing existing culverts under Oak Street Extension as necessary. And this is yet a separate set of plans. The overall plans were prepared by T.F. Moran, and this set of plans were prepared by Ross Engineering. Both of those outfits are, as you know, are out of Portsmouth. But there's a small culvert here that's proposed to be replaced. There's a culvert right here that's proposed to be replaced. There's a culvert right here that's proposed to be replaced, and then this culvert is also proposed to be replaced. This culvert is a reinforced concrete pipe, which has either 8-foot, 10-foot sections, something to that effect. And a number of those sections have separated over time. They're not even connected anymore. So The plan is to pull that pipe, replace it, and restore that. This culvert is a 36-inch reinforced concrete pipe as well. In addition to having become separated in places, the upstream invert is also lower than the downstream invert, so it's acting as a bit of a dam at times under certain flows. And the beavers really like it as well, So that's proposed to be replaced with a 3-foot by 4-foot box culvert, and to repair the elevations, as you will, if you will, as well on both ends. So. Additionally, it doesn't show in this plan. I'm not so sure it isn't a sort of a field adjustment that gets made in cooperation with town staff, but the Oak Street extension will be gated. This Oak Street, part of Oak Street extension will serve as the driveway to this structure with the 5 units. Oak Street will be, Oak Street extension, I should say, will be gated just below the spring, so there will be continued access for people who want to get spring water, but there will be no through traffic on Oak Street extension once the project is built. So
the only people using that last part then would be the people in that 5 unit.
Right, presumably, yep. And they'd have to gain initial entrance access via the new road to get in and out of the project. They won't be able to come out. This is a very narrow opening here at Forest Street. It's basically 1 lane wide. I'm surprised it works as well as it does, but obviously people are very polite. It sounds like most of the people come to get water are very polite, and they're watchful, and someone's coming down, they just wait. Someone's coming up, people wait elsewhere in the street. Seems to work, but it certainly wouldn't work for, traffic for a larger number of homes or residences in the back here, so. I know we're not here for a conditional use permit this evening. That's all been dealt with. But I did want to sort of revisit again in the interest of the new members and the members that may not have been here back in 2018. I did want to sort of revisit, what was discussed and some of the concerns that the commission had back then. From a memo, I think you referenced it earlier, issued on July 12th, 2018 by the commission. It talked about the proposed conservation land. They wanted to make sure that hunting would not be permitted on the property, and it isn't. All these things have been addressed in the homeowners agreement that will run with the project and the property. Prior to town acceptance, applicant will provide a draft deed to the commission for review. Surveyed plan, baseline documentation report, on-site boundary marker placement, and again, we're amenable to that. That's fine. Applicant is responsible for construction of the trail connection to the existing trail network. What that refers to is the fact that one of the bike trails, I believe one, maybe more, are going to be impacted by the actual development, and we're going to reroute that trail, and that trail may involve a stream crossing. Can you go back a slide or two, Kevin? Yeah, that's good. The rerouting of the trail will involve crossing this intermittent stream. And initially, the thought was that we would have to wrap that proposed impact into this dredge and fill permit application. But a subsequent site walk after the project was approved in 2018 with Kristen Murphy demonstrated that we could cross that stream with a footbridge that would be adequate for foot traffic and mountain bikes, and that we'd be able to span the stream from bank to bank or above the bank to above the bank, so there would be no wetlands impact and no need to include that in a dredge and fill permit application. Thank you, Kevin. So that's what that was referring to. Applicant will install conservation boundary discs along the conservation boundary adjacent to the house lots. Again, we're on board with that. That's all fine. Regarding the shoreline conditional use permit, the Conservation Commission wanted to make sure that snow storage was located in areas that received pre-treatment before reaching surface water. Again, we've and this was done before the project was approved. We've adjusted the stormwater management system design so that all the snow storage areas are indeed captured by the stormwater management system. They wanted us to prioritize the use of an open bottom culvert over a box culvert with stream simulation. I discussed that earlier. And again, you see the progression there from closed bottom with stream simulation to open bottom, 5 by 12, then 5 by 16. Now we're at 5 by 24. They wanted to require that construction activities undertaken to prevent the spread of invasive plants from heavily infested areas. We're committed to, again, we've mapped out Japanese knotweed. As invasive species goes, that's a top priority for New Hampshire Department of Transportation. It should be a priority for everybody because it's very easily spread during construction. On machinery and through soils, and movement of soils. So again, we've mapped out all the knotweed on the site, and I believe the approval from the planning board requires a construction monitor, an environmental monitor, and that environmental monitor will be keeping an eye on those construction activities and where our construction activities overlap with an existing population of Japanese knotweed. Will be implementing DOT's recommendations for management of priority species, and as well as cooperative extensions guidance on managing invasive species as well. So let's see. The commission asked us to investigate the connection between the spring and this development to ensure that the development would not have undue impacts to the spring, and the geologist that's associated with the project had previously demonstrated that the vast majority of, if not the entirety of the water for the spring actually comes from the neighborhood from this direction and not from on site. So, and then finally, the commission was concerned that stormwater infrastructure should be designed to reduce the potential for nitrogen loading to surface waters. And again, we're proposing 4 or 5 gravel wetlands, constructed gravel wetlands for stormwater management on this project, and as luck would have it, those have the highest they're rated the highest for nitrogen, total nitrogen removal of all the BMPs. And that comes right out of the Alteration of Terrain Bureau's manuals, so we're in pretty good stead there as well. Regarding the wetland waiver request, the commission didn't feel that they had enough information to make a recommendation back in 2018, but obviously the planning board heard your concerns, and we made a number of changes to the project. And I'd especially like to highlight again the 5 by 24 foot open bottom box culvert, and we're making some changes to the pond outlet structure. Kevin, if you can, next slide again. Yeah, this is a detail of the culvert replacements on Oak Street Extension. Small impact areas here, 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 and here. Next slide, please, Kevin. Can you go up one? Yeah, there you go. This is the 36-inch reinforced culvert reinforced concrete pipe on Oak Street that is, again, the upstream end is at a lower elevation than the downstream end, which again sometimes results in some minor flooding or backwater in this area, which the beavers have capitalized on and off over the years. Again, we're proposing a 3-foot by 4-foot box culvert in that area. Next slide, please, Kevin. And this is an overhead view of the existing and proposed a combination of existing outlet structure on Norris Brook that ponds the largest man-made pond, which I'll show you where that is on the site. But that structure has been undermined by flow, and so the flow is bypassing, and very little, except at really high flows, is going over the actual broad-crested weir in this area. So the project is proposing a wing wall and to repair the structure in this area, and then we're also proposing a sloped eel ramp, if you will, to promote, encourage the passage of eels up this stream. It's been said by others that eels exist in the stream, and I don't have any reason to doubt that necessarily. Natural Heritage Bureau has identified eels in their reporting as a species of concern for this area. So we're proposing this ramp. Kevin, if you could go back up to keep going. That's going to happen right here. Okay, this is our proposed new road with the 5 by 24 foot box culvert. This is the existing concrete outlet structure that this pond was created largely by excavation. All the excavated materials were historically dumped right here. I have no reason to doubt that this was probably all wetland 50, 60 years ago, before they dredged out the brook and dumped the spoils in this area and filled those wetlands, but that's kind of ancient history at this point. This is a proposed temporary access road to get out to the existing structure to do that repair work that I just showed you on the other slide. I've sent copies of the plans and the designs to the New Hampshire Fish and Game Department, and we're continuing to work with them and make sure that we get a design that's agreeable to them. At this point, they're probably pretty sick of this project between the Alteration of Terrain Bureau permit and the various wildlife studies and survey for black racer that was performed for that work, and then me communicating with them about the wetlands permit. They're very familiar with this project at this point. They've been on site a couple times, and regardless, we're continuing to communicate with them. So I don't have a final recommendation from them. In summary, again, impacts have been avoided wherever possible and minimized where they're unavoidable. A good example of that would be the retaining walls. We got very extensive retaining walls along both sides of the new road. The idea being it limits your side slope grading, which drastically limits your footprint and your quantity of filling needed. Impacts are mostly associated with providing access to otherwise buildable property or to improve existing conditions. For example, culvert replacements and upgrades, hazardous waste remediation, and the eel ramp are three good examples. We don't have any gratuitous wetland impacts, and we're proposing compensatory mitigation for the impacts we do have. I've been speaking with Kristen Murphy about the potential to replace a culvert that's on your watch list of culverts that are either failed or doomed to failure, if you will, and hopefully we can we can take care of one of those for you as compensatory mitigation for our impacts. But we're continuing to coordinate with your natural resource planner on that.
It's a site over on Tamarin Lane.
Yes, yeah. So, with the impacts we've proposed, I calculate our mitigation, compensatory mitigation for this project will likely be in the neighborhood of $41,000. And, hopefully if that doesn't take care of the culvert replacement at Tamarind, it will make a significant dent in it. Kevin, can you scroll down, please? Let's see, keep going. There we go. Okay, with that, I'll take any questions if you have them.
Does anyone have any questions for Mark before we do public comment?
Mark, maybe I've missed something along the way here, which is getting to be a problem with me. But you're familiar with Kurt Steckler's letter that he sent to us.
Yes.
And in it, he talked about the fact that the one thing was the concrete underpass on the Norris Brook part, and you've commented on that's going to be repaired. But then he talked about the access, and I wasn't quite sure where he was, but talked about a second access that wouldn't fragment the wetland area or the fish. He particularly concerned about the fish. Yeah, where am I now? Okay. But he did say there was a proposed access road, an alternative. He had an alternative road coming in. And did you mention why that's not?
Yeah, that alternative was discussed at length back in 2018 with the planning board, and it was dismissed for a variety of reasons. But but I'm happy to broach it again, Kevin, if you don't mind going back to keep going.
Yeah, I think that was ultimately what came out of our meeting last time, 2018, was Pete was here and brought that up, and then it subsequently was discussed. Yeah. So why don't you? I mean, I think there's going to be some comment on this letter, but we can
right there.
Address it, talk to it now, and then we'll hear more about it. I assume.
As I understand it, Mr. Steckler's idea was to come in. He talks about trying to reuse Oak Street Extension. We can't use Oak Street Extension because there's two houses right at the entrance that are right on top of the road, and the road is literally one lane wide there, so it can't be improved enough to meet town engineering specifications for road design and construction. So that requires us to come in from this direction. And I should back up a bit. The applicants actually purchased this property separately for the sole purpose of providing access to get back to this otherwise buildable land in the rear. So they've taken a significant expenditure and expended significant financial resources to provide an alternative access because this access wasn't going to work, not just for wetlands reasons or environmental reasons, but for road design and safety reasons as well. But Mr. Steckler's idea, as I understood it at the time, was to, if we couldn't come in here, to come in here again, but to come down over this through here somewhere and trying to use Oak Street Extension to avoid a second crossing of Norris Brook, which we have right here. That was the idea, to avoid a second crossing. Unfortunately, the shortcoming, there are a number, but the biggest shortcoming of that idea, you can see these slopes. They're steep and they're very long. There would be a massive road cut and or fill to bring this road down over this slope, this steep slope. And don't be fooled, these little white spots those are just where the contour elevations print out on the drawing. So that's the only reason they're white, is because that's where it shows what the contour elevations are. But this is solid orange all the way out. And so coming down over this slope would require massive cutting and filling and massive wetland alteration to try and maintain and utilize this existing crossing. And my understanding at the time was the Planning Board and the Conservation Commission said that wasn't worth the trade-off. Additionally, the term fragmentation frequently comes up, and I think it's important to know, yeah, we've got the existing crossing of Northbrook here. You've got the existing concrete outlet structure right there, and then you've got the railroad tracks right here. So there's plenty of fragmentation of this system already. To say that construction of this road is going to be the end of that corridor strikes me as a bit of a reach. I'm going to give Mr. Steckler the benefit of the doubt that he was aware of the fact that we've increased the culvert from a 16 by 5 foot opening to a 24 foot opening. And again, you saw in one of my graphics the upland bench beneath the structure that will be available for wildlife passage once that structure is constructed. Does that answer your question, Mr. Campbell? Thank you.
What's the road width of the box at the culvert? I don't know that that's been talked about.
I'm not an engineer, I just play one on TV, but I'm going to guess that it's probably 24 feet. Maybe Mr. Sharples can shed a little light on that.
Pavement width is 24 feet.
Yeah.
I believe there's a sidewalk 5 feet, 6 inches of curbing, so.
Yeah.
Impervious surface area wise is probably about 29.
30 feet.
29, just under, yeah.
So there is a sidewalk for pedestrian access out.
Yep.
But then have the retaining wall and any, slopes. I don't know what you're asking width. If it's pavement, it's 24.
Yeah.
Right. No, I'm trying to imagine this as a three-dimensional. We said that was the cross-sectional was interesting, but
Kevin, do you mind?
It is a very three-dimensional space out there. We did walk, the commission did have a site visit in 2018 before the meeting, and we walked that area.
The retaining walls are, for all intents and purposes, vertical, but they do slope a little bit from top to bottom. So the footprint, I imagine, is a little bit wider at the base, but I don't know exactly what it is. But I wouldn't be surprised if it's 32 feet at the base, 31, 32 feet at the base by the time you accommodate the slope of the retaining wall.
And those footings, are those like poured concrete footings that are in that area?
Yes. So we'll have pretty significant excavation here, and then obviously everything that's underneath the road will be permanently filled, but all this will be restored. There'll be excavation out here that will be restored, excavation out here, to accommodate this footing as well. They'll all be restored. The grades will be restored. Area will be replanted, reseeded.
And you don't buy a culvert like that, so you're constructing it and pouring it on site?
It's portions of it are poured on site, portions of it are precast.
Uh-huh.
Yep. This part is all precast, I believe.
I guess that makes sense. Yeah, you can get sections on a truck and bring them right in there.
Yeah.
I think it's probably similar to the ones that are under the Parkway now. Newfields Road and Parkway, those were replaced 4 or 5 years ago. What was that?
Court Street.
Court Street, yeah, 4 or 5 years ago on the Parkway, and they were precast. That's why they come now.
Okay.
Yeah.
I think it's important to keep in mind, this is a 50-acre site. It's a 41-lot subdivision. We still only have 6,800 square feet of impact for the actual project. That's pretty good. You had more impact earlier this evening for replacing utility poles.
That was all temporary.
Eversource.
All right.
Some of it.
Okay, now we're good. Do we want to transition to just public comment and then we'll come back to more questions?
Yes.
Okay, thank you, Mark.
Thank you.
Go for it.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Todd Piskovich, 22 Forest Street. I had a bit more to say and a bit more to read, but since Mr. Campbell already asked the question about the alternate route, I wanted to just read some of Pete Steckler's letter. I'll read a little less of it now and then comment on that. I know some of you may not have had a chance to absorb the whole thing, the whole packet. As a former member of this commission, I know how big those packets can be. Mr. Steckler does say that this is by far, where the crossing is by far the highest quality wetland system on the property. He is the one, by the way, Mr. Jacobs referred to sighting of an eel. Mr. Steckler is the one who set a minnow trap upstream of this property on a tributary to Norris Brook, and within a few days he caught an American eel, not an eagle, an eel, and released it back into the water. Given the high quality and function of the lower Norris Brook wetland complex, it begs the question why the applicant needs to build a second crossing of Norris Brook when there's an existing road that already accesses the property. The applicant has roughed out an alternative conceptual plan to utilize the existing road to access the property, but has chosen not to advance this alternative. Mind you, this alternative plan only came up because Pete Steckler brought it up in a Conservation Commission meeting. As far as we know, the applicant wasn't looking at this alternative before that. And the applicant did not do a full engineering workup of this alternative, basically just laid it out on a map and explained why it wouldn't be feasible, but didn't give any engineering details about that. And that was debated by the planning board, but the planning board never sent it back to the Conservation Commission. The Conservation Commission did not get a chance to comment on that alternate route. A little background, this review of this project has been ongoing since winter of 2016. Many of you weren't on the commission, and this may be the first time you're seeing these plans. On July 10th, as previously referred to, on July 10th, 2018, this commission unanimously passed a recommendation for the planning board not to approve a wetland waiver for, among other things, lack of information about shellfish within the area, information about net zero nitrogen loading, and a better understanding of the wetland function. On January 17th, 2019, 6 months later, the planning board voted 5-2 to approve the project. That included approving 8 waivers, one of which was the wetland waiver, with little to no discussion at the time of the vote for each waiver. They didn't consider at that time this commission's recommendations, nor did they ever send it back to this commission for closure. More importantly, Section 9.9.3 of the town site plan review regs under item 3 states the applicant has demonstrated that the use cannot be reasonably carried out on a portion or portions of the lot which are outside of the buffer. This gets to the alternative route. So the planning board, having seen the proposed alternative route, heard testimony from experts saying that the alternative route could be less impactful, decided to allow the wetland waiver anyway, without asking for input from the Conservation Commission. I bring this up because tonight, your charge is to make recommendations to New Hampshire Department of Environmental Services regarding a state wetland permit. You are the local stewards for this, for the wetlands. Norris Brook is a vital wetland with a 544-acre watershed above the proposed crossing. As a former chair of this commission, I see you have 3 options. You can either send a letter of support of the project to DES, you can decide not to comment officially, or you can tell DES that the applicant has not met ENV WT 311.07, demonstration of avoidance of minimization. 311.07B3 requires an explanation of whether alternative designs or techniques, such as different layouts, different construction sequencing, or other technologies could be used to avoid impacts to jurisdictional areas or their functions and values, etc. I recommend this option, and if you need more information to support that, I might suggest attaching Pete Steckler's letter to your recommendation. I think the DES wetland scientists should have the chance to see this alternative. The applicant's narrative of their demonstration of avoidance didn't mention this alternate route, and I don't believe the plans showed the alternate route. I think the DES wetland scientists should at least see the alternate route. I'd like them to go out to the site and actually see where both routes are proposed, and then let them make that decision. But it would be beneficial for you as a commission to ask them to do that, to look at 311.07. That's ENV WT 311.07 B3. Thank you.
Hello, thank you for allowing me to offer this opportunity. My name is Suzanne Iverson, and I live at 5 Walnut Street. And I know that there is an outstanding AOT permit that had wetlands issues as part of it, and while this commission is not a part of that permit review process, we feel that it is your responsibility to provide stewardship oversight to the areas affected. I'm gonna read, will you pass that letter up for me? I'm going to read a letter that was drafted. It's a memorandum. I'm not sure if it was in your packet or not, but it's to Bethany McCarthy at the AOT and David Price at Wetland Bureau, DEAS. There's 2 memos, one dated March, I believe 8th. Oh, I can't lick my finger with my mask on.
I got it.
Thank you. March 18th. That's referenced in the one I'm going to read from April 19th. This is from Robert Rosen, who has a doctorate in civil engineering and water resources. He's a recognized industry leader in green infrastructure and watershed management, and consults locally and nationally on stormwater management and planning, and for the last 25 years. So he writes, Dear Ms. McCarthy, this letter is in regards to the April 9th request for more information for AOT application 210218-020 Rose Farm Development Exeter by T.F. Moran for the D'Agostino Trust. We appreciate the opportunity to comment on the application. Our goal is to make this project be the strongest application possible within the AOT rules. We appreciate the thorough review conducted by DES and a few additional concerns that we would like to bring to your attention. This review is being conducted on behalf of Exeter Area Conservancy. This memo details specific issues and concerns identified in the submission package that we believe should prevent permit approval. In particular, there are important issues regarding 1, a lack of channel protection that will result in wetland impacts. 2, non-compliance with state requirements for alteration of terrain regarding lack of treatment in the form of infiltration, biofiltration, and groundwater recharge for new and redevelopment. Number 1, channel protection and wetland impacts. As noted in my prior review letter, which is the one dated March 18th, these areas include high-quality wetlands that are, with one exception, unfragmented, and the lack of channel protection raises concerns for aquatic habitat. The lack of infiltration and biofiltration at the source raises concerns for reduced groundwater recharge and increased runoff. In my review of the recent submission, it appears that the 2/8/21 revised drainage analysis has again incorrectly stated the channel protection results in analysis. Specifically, the bank fill discharge channel protection volume does not meet the standards for channel protection. The applicant's drainage analysis report incorrectly states the results of the HydroCAD report again. These numbers were incorrectly presented in the application to the town as well. The current drainage analysis claims that requirements are met, whereas review of the HydroCAD analysis shows otherwise, as noted below. And on page 2, there's a little graph where he maps out the differences in what was reported and what is. It is our understanding that AOT will only allow a waiver if the change in volume is less than 0.1 acre per foot, whereas the applicant's own data shows an increase. And this is the part that's most important that he wants people to really think about, is this next paragraph. The lack of channel protection, infiltration, or filtration will unquestionably result in wetland erosion and subsequent impacts to aquatic habitat and water quality. The 2-year storm, aka channel protection event, is an exceptionally important metric for aquatic habitat impacts. AOT states, the purpose of this section is to protect channels, downstream receiving waters, and wetland from erosion associated sedimentation resulting from urbanization within a watershed. Increases in runoff volume are well established to have negative impacts on aquatic habitat and water quality. The increases in runoff volume will also contribute to reduce climate resiliency and make this more prone to flooding. The second concern he identifies is concerns regarding lack of infiltration, biofiltration, and groundwater recharge. While we applaud the use of gravel wetlands and porous pavements, the current application does not provide sufficient groundwater recharge. There should be more source controls in infiltration that will result in additional groundwater recharge. Specifically, the shared driveway B and the 400+ foot of access road to multifamily dwellings receives no treatment and will drain directly into a perennial stream. We agree wholeheartedly with the applicant's preference to not disturb any of the surrounding wetland and habitat areas for storm water management, as no expansion to Oak Street Extension is proposed. However, there are plenty of remaining options for treatment. Notably, there should be roadway infiltration or some other form of infiltration or filtration that can be constructed within the existing roadway footprint. Options exist for subsurface infiltration and treatment that will provide treatment and groundwater recharge. We understand that AOT's position is, if topography allows for filter media with berming of basins, then groundwater recharge infiltration needs to be considered more closely, even with high SHWT. We believe there's ample opportunity for infiltration from regrading that will occur from 1, building foundations that typically results in raising of grade around a building an average of 2 to 4 feet to balance cut and fill of the housing, and 2, within the roadway to the multifamily dwelling. The applicant is in the position that the management of stormwater runoff for this area would require additional wetland impacts in the road right-of-way of best management practice. We believe this is avoidable through good engineering design. For example, the UNHSC has demonstrated in the city of Dover a subsurface infiltration system within a roadway. AOT recently permitted a project that similarly had subsurface roadway infiltration and pre-treatment, AOT number 1455. These types of projects and others can minimize impacts outside of the roadway footprint. The existing raised roadway along Oak Street Extension could be redesigned to allow for sufficient separation from SHWT, or alternately, the system could be lined to prevent infiltration if it were found to be untenable. A line system, while not providing recharge, would provide treatment prior to discharge and could be designed such that the runoff peak flow would be reduced. For these reasons, we feel the project application is deficient and requires substantial changes for permitting compliance. I would be happy to discuss these items in more detail. Thank you for consideration. Regards, Robert Rosen of Waterstone Engineering, PLLC. Thank you.
Anyone else?
June Fabray, Chestnut Street, Exeter. I don't live near Rose Farm, but as an Exeter resident, I want to do everything I can to protect our wetlands. I have walked the property on the walk offered by the engineers about 1.5 years ago and could see firsthand how fragile the ecosystem there really was. Pete Steckler, a certified wetland scientist and former neighbor of the site, actually caught and released an American eel with his kids upstream of the Rose Farm property. I worry that the developers have minimized the effects of this development on wetland conservation and on fish and wildlife. It's my understanding that the planning board's rules regarding developments were the result of a broad town consensus about what would be fair for both developers and the town. The developer asked for a large number of waivers in order to avoid being disqualified for approval, and it is disappointing that the planning board allowed these waivers, especially while the Conservation Commission had concerns and raised them to the planning board, but they were never addressed. I think it's important to reassess what developing the Rose Farm site would mean to conservation in Exeter. This special plot of land is a gift that the town enjoys, and once spoiled, would result in irreparable harm to our whole conservation profile.
Thank you. June provided a letter to us, if anyone would like to read it.
Question, Mr. Chair.
Yeah.
I'm very familiar with Dr. Rosine, by the way. I've worked with him on countless projects, and I respect his skills and his knowledge and what he brings to the table. Two questions come to my mind. Number one, has the applicant seen these letters prior to tonight?
I can't say that I have, but that may speak more to the fact that a lot of those are more engineering concerns than not. So the engineers may have seen those, but I would like to obtain a copy of those documents before leaving tonight if possible, certainly.
Yeah, and the other question is, I mean, I would love to be able to dig in deeper into these memorandums from Dr. Rosine, and actually have the opportunity to talk to Dr. Rosine at a public meeting. That's not afforded this evening, so I have some questions that I would, probably want to ask, but I can't do that because he's not here. So, I mean, while this is very enlightening, interesting information, I can't give an opinion on this evening without further research, knowledge, understanding, and reading. So I'll make that clear.
Mr. Chairman, again, I'm assuming these have all been submitted previously. I think that's a pretty safe assumption. Mr. Rosine testified at length about these concerns, and my recollection is these were all dismissed. For example, he talks about the fact that we haven't reinfiltrated or recharged stormwater. That's because of the soil types that we have on site. Alteration of Terrain Bureau is well aware of that, and we petitioned them for a waiver from reinfiltrating because of soil types. It's allowable under their rules, and I believe they've granted that waiver as they understand the soil types that we're dealing with, and that's why we have gravel wetlands for stormwater treatment. So I think we're beating a bit of a dead horse on a lot of this. And I'd also like to back up regarding the alternatives analysis. Mr. Baum, Attorney Baum brought it to my attention, refreshed my memory, that the town hired an independent third-party reviewer to review our application back in 2018, and one of the specific items that consultant was asked to address was the alternatives, the alternative that Mr. Steckler had identified. I believe that consultant was Patrick Seekamp Environmental, and I can provide you with, or I believe town staff can provide you with a copy of his results where he clearly dismisses that alternative as not being suitable. The alternative that Mr. Steckler identifies as not being appropriate.
Did Mr. Rosine come here, or was that at the planning board that he spoke?
I believe he spoke a number of times. Rosine spoke a number of times at planning board, I believe it was. I don't know that he came here.
Here's the problem I'm having. We reviewed this in 2018. We made a recommendation, whatnot. We haven't heard anything from the planning board about this, about these people speaking to the planning board about this. Now he's spoken many times. They hired, I know him too, but the other third party.
Patrick Seekamp?
Yeah, we didn't get anything back on that. So it's very hard for me to come up and say, my background is not in this. And it's hard for me to come up and say, yes, let's go with it, because I don't get the feedback that everybody else is getting, or from the planning board. So I think we've got a problem there.
I can certainly provide you with a copy of the Seekamp findings, and I think that would speak to Mr. Steckler's letter pretty convincingly.
No.
Yeah, I guess I would look to Dave maybe in a minute to talk to this Patrick Seekamp, but what Bill just stated, and I think Todd's summary and what he described is we did have a long meeting in 2018. We weren't in a place to approve the conditional use or recommend approving the conditional use permit. Partly because of this alternative design that came out of that. That was one of the things we certainly weren't, that one of the major issues that came up. And I guess I know that there has been a lot of back and forth on this project, and I know Kristen Murphy has been in touch and worked with Dave Sharples and the board and the planning board. There has been a fair amount of communication, but it hasn't come back to the board, or the commission itself in that time. And I guess this alternatives analysis of this alternative crossing seems like an important point to make, and what was done and what wasn't, and there are sort of a number of opinions being expressed. I guess partly, and I don't know exactly how to respond to these. I don't know that we need to respond to these. The alteration of terrain, this may be a sort of a second issue that's new to me. These memos were not provided to us ahead of time, were not in our packet, so we have not reviewed those. But Dave, do you have any comments on on any of the process with the third-party review of the alternative?
I mean, that was a couple years ago now, so,
yeah.
I mean, I would have to get refreshed. I mean, that was to do with the conditional use permit and the work, and the shoreline permit, the work inside the buffer. It didn't have anything to do with the actual wetland impacts, which is a wetland application before you tonight, so.
Right.
Are they two different, am I confused, like, aren't you looking at what they're proposing in the wetlands dredge and fill permit application and commenting on that? And all that with the planning board didn't talk about direct impacts to wetlands because we only regulate the buffer. So they were looking at the conditional use permit, the shoreline of the work and the buffer. So I guess I'm a little confused as how, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah, I guess I get that. And we do have a fairly narrow scope tonight in some sense, but I guess in terms of determining whether or not this design, I feel like there is some burden that we have to evaluate. Is this avoidance and minimization of this wetland impact? And so in determining that avoidance and minimization, don't we need to think about the design? And that brings in this point, I guess, in my head.
I got you. Yeah, okay. I follow that. What I do remember is there was questions with the planning board. We did hire a third-party wetland scientist, Patrick Seecamp from Seecamp Environmental. He came in, he walked the site. I was there as well with Mr. Jacobs. And we looked at where the alternative road was going to go, and then he reviewed it, among other things. He also reviewed some wetland boundary information and so forth. So I gave his opinion on several things. But the conclusions, I think the planning board accepted what you're seeing as the preferred way. I don't remember exactly how Patrick couched it. Sometimes they're very specific about how they couch something and say you could, so I'd have to pull that report. I mean, I probably could, if you want me to, while you keep going on, I could probably dig that out, if that would be helpful, because I don't want to put words in, Mr. Seecamp's mouth.
I'm not sure what to say in terms of you finding it or not.
I mean, it wouldn't take me long. I
mean, if it's findable, and I don't know if it would be helpful or not to this discussion at this point, but it may. I don't know.
Mr. Chairman, with all due respect, I think if you're going to take Mr. Steckler's letter and give that the import that it sounds like it's getting, I think you owe it to the project, and you owe it to Mr. Seecamp to review his letter as well. It speaks to that issue.
Yeah. I do feel like this design is certainly better. It seems like a good crossing design at some level. So assuming this is the alternative, I'm not sure what else could be done assuming this is the alternative. So I guess there's a number of ways to think about this. So it is a complex process for us.
Well, I guess I would have to ask, is the commission ready to re-engineer this project?
Good.
Which is, if we're talking about an alternative access road.
Yeah.
That's, we're talking about re-engineering the project, and I don't know if we certainly can comment on it. We can comment on a new re-engineered alternative, but we don't know what that actual re-engineered alternative is. We only have a conceptual
Right.
the conceptual idea of what it is. So and typically from our land use, the engineering of this, goes before the planning board, and the planning board makes decisions. Now, they already have, I understand. I was on and off the planning board at various times, so I don't know if I was on the planning board at the time that Mr. Seacamp came in and gave his discussion. So, as a select board rep, you move back and forth every year. So, but I have sat on as a select board rep on some planning board meetings for this project. But I can say that I have not been on all of them. So I don't have any continuity in that aspect.
Is public comment still open? I mean,
Yeah, no, I think we're sort of in we're still in a public comment discussion phase. So yes, sure.
Paul DeGrandis, 23 Oak Street. So I live right by the freshwater spring. In one memo, you were, by Rob Rosine, you were pointed to a hydrology study using HydroCAD. On 3 separate occasions, we've found the numbers to be different that the applicant has supplied you with to the calculations that Rob has produced. And those differences have never been accounted for. Todd spoke earlier this evening, providing you with the criteria for which DES is looking for your decision to be made in, as well as a way to put forward a suggestion to DES that perhaps more information is needed or that alternatives haven't been fully vetted. The combination of possibly false data or data put in question and alternatives not fully exercised, I think is sufficient enough, along with the clause that Todd had pointed out that DES is looking for, to say, you can't make a decision. And if you can make a decision, your decision is based on flawed data and missing data. And that's what you need to go to DES and say. You're looking to see what the impact of wetlands is. And the numbers are potentially small, permanent impact, but potentially small. But that's potentially all on flawed data. That would be a grave mistake. I don't think anybody wants that. So, my point. I'll get to it.
Yeah.
There's potentially data in question. That's incorrect. And if that data is corrected, it radically changes the characteristics of the water dynamics here in this section of wetlands. There's an open question whether the alternative was fully explored, correctly engineered, and proven to be not adequate. And I don't think we have that evidence. Thank you very much.
Yeah, I don't know if the data is flawed, because I'm getting the charge that is flawed is coming from from Dr. Rosine. Not, I haven't seen the applicant's data either that answers to that or refutes that. I don't know. And as I said,
the applicant's data.
Excuse me. So again, I don't want to dismiss. I would never dismiss Dr. Rosine or dismiss Mr. Steckler's comments, but I just can't take those comments into consideration without knowing what all the other data says. I mean, I'm not a HydroCAD expert, but I'm familiar with the concept. I don't, there's a charge here that is flawed. I don't know that because I haven't seen I got to see the original ones. I have to see the comparison to see if they're flawed or not. So that makes it difficult. And why wasn't this part of the whole planning board process back 2 years ago, when I'm sure those drainage calculations were presented? That's one question I have. But two is the fact that here we are talking about new information that's being supplied by other people other than the applicant. And you typically, I want to give the applicant, I want to give everybody equal opportunity to respond to this, and we're not getting that right now. So.
I guess just one more comment too on this, on the Rob Rosine's analysis. It wasn't sent to us. This is for the alteration of terrain permit, which deals with the stormwater drainage. So I'm not sure if this HydroCAD analysis would change the crossing, or would it? I guess that's what I would look to, is how would the stormwater management then affect the direct wetland impact related to the crossing? I'm not seeing a full connection between those two points. Certainly, the overall design is related, but they are distinct aspects of the design. So I guess that's all I have on that. But yeah.
Again, Suzanne Iverson from 5 Walnut Street. And when the soil scientist says that the soil in the lot had a lot of fines, is not conducive to infiltration, Dr. Rosine's comments on that are that this is not true. Approximately 25% of the buildable area of a hydrologic soil group A and B soils. The remaining is hydrologic soil group C. All hydrological soil D soils are in wetlands and would not be built anyhow. For this reason, AOT requires on all soils except HSGD. So he does have some comments about the comment that has been made that it's not conducted to infiltration.
And again, it's impossible. I know but has Dr. Rosine received answers to his memorandums? Do we know that? I mean, these were back in March and April, right?
They
this year.
were provided to you only because they were also provided to DES.
Right, and is DES typically comments? I'm sure they would comment on.
These are all rehashed comments from the planning board process, I can tell you. All this discussion was had at length back in 2018 and dismissed. And the most recent comment about hydrologic soil grouping, the soils that Mr. Rosine refers to are in the middle of the site. They're not in a location that is conducive to managing stormwater. You can't make stormwater go uphill. You have to treat stormwater, you have to take advantage of gravity and topography, and when you do that, which you have to, and you situate the stormwater management BMPs where they need to go to capture the maximum amount of stormwater and treat the maximum amount of stormwater, unfortunately, at the lower elevations on the site, the soils are not conducive to infiltration and recharge. And as far as Mr. Rosine submitting HydroCAD analysis that conflicts with our HydroCAD analysis, who's to say that his HydroCAD analysis is correct? This is pretty complex stuff. You have to make a lot of assumptions in HydroCAD analyses. If he makes even a slightly different assumption, he's going to come up with different results.
But with all due respect, if there are, we all understand that within this modeling work, you are making assumptions and basing those, but if there's vast differences between those differences should be looked at and, we have to come to a conclusion of, at what point are we comfortable sitting on any number of assumptions? So
the conclusion, I forget the exact detail about the difference in discharge that Mr. Rosine raises. I recall that having been brought up at the planning board meeting, that was discussed, dealt with, dismissed. That's old news. We're rehashing old arguments. We can certainly speak to them again. We've spoken to them once before. We can certainly speak to them again if it pleases the commission. But in many respects, we're beating a dead horse.
Yeah, I think a lot of the frustration up at this end, and maybe I'll just speak for myself in that case, is the fact that it's really not a dead horse here, because I haven't seen any of this. All of this is new. I have memos sitting in front of me now that are recently dated. I'm hearing that this has been going on for years now. I'm seeing discrepancies as to model results. This is just a whirlwind of absolutely new information that I am now trying to make a very impactful decision on, which is infuriating, to put it lightly.
Understood.
So, that said, I think it's nice to kind of pull back and figure out what scope we're working with here, what's our jurisdiction, and where some of these actually rest, because even if there are some discrepancies, whose job and responsibility is it to actually look at those and get through that process? Because I know I don't sit on the planning board, I don't sit on AOT, I sit on the Conservation Commission here, and what is our responsibility to look at and actually make a decision on?
I would suggest to the commission that regarding issues surrounding the Alteration of Terrain Bureau permit, that we let the Alteration of Terrain Bureau do their job. Yes, Mr. Rosine has raised potential concern that some issues regarding alteration of terrain data could then have impacts on wetlands, may be bona fide, but that's for the Alteration of Terrain Bureau to deal with. That's their department.
So you don't have your alteration of terrain permit yet?
I don't believe so. No, okay. I don't believe that's been issued. We've only recently supplied them with the results of a wildlife habitat analysis and a survey for black racer snakes.
Yeah, I tend to agree that we don't need to get into stormwater drainage tonight, and that's not our main. I like talking about those things, and I get sucked into talking about them, but regarding our scope is really looking at direct wetland impacts.
Mr. Chair, I forget, and things have changed. What's the clock on this? There used to be a clock that you had.
Yeah.
Conservation Commission had to respond to DES in a certain time frame from the submission. I don't know what it is now.
I don't know what those dates are. That's a good question.
I believe you had 14 days to place a hold on the application if you wanted to, and then that gave you 40 days. That gives you 40 days to submit comments.
Okay. And this was,
so I don't know where we are in that.
No, I just wanted to know what the clock is, because
Yeah, no.
You have to respond. You have to respond, or we have to make we have to give a response in a time frame. I didn't know what that was.
Yeah, so I don't know when the submission date was.
I can tell you in a second.
And I haven't done that. I might have it here.
Do we need to go through the conditions for a CUP again? Is that?
We don't, because this isn't a CUP.
So
this is just the GS.
I'm what Todd is. What are we supposed to just say, yay or nay?
Well, let me try to craft a motion and see how this goes. Given is not.
I don't think we're quite ready to make a motion.
Sure, that's fine. Go ahead. I'll wait. I'll wait because the public still wants to comment. I would recommend that we ask for a 40-day extension.
Thank you. I didn't think that the chair had closed public comment yet.
No, we haven't.
Todd Piskovitz again. I have several comments on what the discussion that's been going on so far. While it's true that AOT and other concerns came up many times ad nauseum at the planning board, every time it came up, the planning board would dismiss it because they said, that's not our purview. Bring that to the state. AOT issues are a state permit. So that's why that never got resolved at the planning board. And again, you're not here necessarily to deal with the AOT permit, but you are here to look at the wetland application. And again, the alternative route, and Mr. Clement had made the comment that he can't comment on an alternative route that he hasn't seen. We're not asking you to comment on the route itself. We're asking you to ask the DES to have the applicant provide more information about alternative routes that wouldn't be as impactful. Again, Mr. Steckler mapped out an alternative route. It was not engineered. There was no engineered drawing or plans. So Mr. Seecamp's review of that was based on a plan view map and a field visit, no engineering. He couldn't make a really in-depth evaluation of this plan because it didn't exist. So regardless of what's in Mr. Seecamp's letter, I still urge you to tell the DES that you don't approve this. And the commission has said numerous times already how frustrated they are that they don't have any of this information. And I would honestly blame the planning board for that, because a lot of this stuff should have come back to the Conservation Commission and never did. And I would also ask, in that memo to the DES, I believe that those Dr. Rosine's letters were also copied to Eben Lewis and the Wetlands Bureau, who will be reviewing this project. In your memo to DES, where you ask them to reject the project because they haven't met ENVWT 31107, also ask that they thoroughly review and vet Dr. Rosine's letter, which they should have a copy of. And that way, you, as a commission, aren't the ones making those decisions. The experts are. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Again, I'm not going to criticize the planning board in terms of communication here. And I my motion was going to be to ask for the 40-day extension on this to review.
If I may, we filed on September 28th, so.
So we're still within the 14 days, right? Am I counting right? No.
Well.
No, we're not.
It says on their website it was the 29th. So add to that.
Right. So, yeah, so obviously it takes a little time for the mail to work, so we got an extra day there. But I would say if you get a letter in soon that says, at the very least, we want to hold for 40 days while we continue to review, I'm sure that DES would accept that. And that way you could get that out very quickly. And
yeah, that's what my opinion. I'd like to see the commission do. But again, it's up to the commission. It's a commission vote.
Mr. Chairman,
I don't want to make a comment that we reject or we ask for something different. I just think I'd like to have more time to review this and maybe get some more information from the planning board, going back 2 years or whatever it is, 3 years. So I'm more inclined to ask without making an opinion about whether this project is good, bad, or indifferent. Just wanting more time to make that decision. So I'll wait, see what the board wants to do on this. The commission wants to do before I...
Can we talk a little more about these timelines? So if it was submitted on the 29th, we have 2 weeks, did you say?
Yeah, 14 days. Yeah.
14 days, that's tomorrow.
Yeah, you need to get a letter. I don't think it needs to be fancy. I think an email coming from Mr. Sharples would do it.
No, it has to come from the commission.
Yeah, it would probably come from me.
From the chair. If the commission so voted that. it would
Yeah,
come from the chair.
I issue the letters. So then, our next meeting, I'm just trying to think practically about what this means, is the 9th of November. I believe it's the second Tuesday. I don't, what does it say in our main?
Yeah, it does.
Yeah. So that would be that would be 28 days, because it's 4 weeks. Okay, so that would still be in the 40-day window.
Again, that's my suggestion. I'm sure.
Yeah, I'm just trying to play this out
suggestions. That's fine.
and understand what we're
it's
talking
good.
about.
No, I think that's why I asked for the timeline. It's important to do.
No, it's important.
Yeah.
Are there any other public comments? We're still sort of in a public comment space.
Mr. Chairman, if I just might take a moment regarding the alternatives analysis. I don't think you should take my word for it. You should talk to Mr. Lewis, Evan Lewis at DES, but I think he'll tell you that we've done due diligence as it relates to alternatives analysis for this project. That there's nothing we haven't provided that we should have provided.
Yeah, that's certainly one question, is what is the threshold of the due diligence related to alternatives analysis for avoidance and minimization. I don't know what they expect or what we should expect as reasonable, or what's been provided.
Well, like I said, I don't take my word for it. Talk to Evan Lewis, and I don't know how much time he spent reviewing the application to date. I suspect, given how thick it is, if he has started on it, he hasn't gotten all the way through it. But I'm sure he'll tell you, we've done due diligence.
Okay.
If he has been through the application.
All right, thank you. I guess it's 9:43 as well.
Past my bedtime.
So I guess I'll close the public comment portion, assuming that there aren't any more comments. Does anyone have comments on this, on the commission regarding this proposed motion to continue this at our next meeting with more information?
Well, I asked for a 40-day extension for comment, I believe is.
I would like to see that. We got, the data we got for this meeting, maybe 500 pages on Friday. I'm not great at reading a novel, and I was away for the weekend and away today. So I must say I didn't quite get through every page of that.
It's challenging there was like sort of everything, and we don't need to review everything.
Well, and I wasn't sure what the most key was. So I go along, I second Don's motion.
I haven't made the motion yet.
Well,
I second the idea of it.
I second the idea. Thank you.
Commission is a suggestion.
All right, so at this point, it seems like I haven't heard any. Don, do you want to make that?
I move the commission to ask the DES Wetlands for a 40-day extension to provide our recommendation on this project. Ask for a 40-day extension to provide information per whatever the statute says. It's not a statute.
For the decision on the wetland permit.
Yeah, I think that the official term is a hold, 40-day hold, not an extension.
40-day hold.
Move that the commission ask DES for a 40-day hold.
I'll second that.
Okay. Connor, does that make sense in terms of the process that you're aware of?
Yeah, yes.
I'm looking to you as the wetlands expert.
That was me staring at the rules. Yes, it does. I'm still a little unclear at this point what our role is, just because I got pounded with information in the last half hour.
Yeah.
AOT, I would like to leave AOT to AOT. I'm not a HydroCAD man by any means.
Okay.
As far as wetlands go, I think putting it on a hold, we can get our comments in. I don't believe that this is a major impact project.
It is.
Yes.
It is a major.
Okay, yeah, so they'll be taking their time with it as well, so.
Yes, sir.
Yeah.
At least 75 minutes.
Yeah.
Right. Okay. All right. So this, right, isn't necessarily going to slow their review down anyways.
Right, kind of just gives us more time.
Just gives us some additional time. Okay. Dave Sharple.
Just in addition to, is that all you need is time? Do you need anything from?
Yeah, I think we need to.
I think that's the next step.
The next step is what does this mean for the next meeting? So Kristen Murphy doesn't pull her hair out.
Well, I think, and I mean, I think we'd like to have more information from the planning board, the whole discussion about the alternative road, including, not Dr. Seacamp, including Patrick Seacamp's.
I have Patrick Seacamp's.
Yeah.
I can get you that.
Yeah, we want that.
Okay.
Maybe minutes of that meeting. Oh, well, we should have access to the minutes of the meeting.
Yeah.
We can get the minutes. And I'd like to ask, and somehow if Dr. Rosine, who's authored this, could come before the commission to talk about it.
Well,
I'm not going to subpoena him. We're not doing subpoenas.
I mean, I think the right people are here to hear that, and that's not for us to. That's outside of our. I mean, certainly we could make allowances for additional public comment at the next meeting.
Yeah.
But he's certainly not. We're not obligating him at any meeting. Because he's not part of the he's not the applicant or the body here, so.
Can we have DES review the Rosine letter before next meeting? Is that something that they could comment on?
Apparently it was sent to them.
It was sent to them.
Yeah,
Okay.
Dave Price, yeah.
Okay.
So
Could we get comments back?
If they're
working on.
Yeah, I mean, if it's from April, I would assume.
It's going to be a while. They can.
Okay. This is not, I mean, I guess I'm sort of with Connor and not as inclined to take up the stormwater drainage issues. Unless I don't see a direct connection to the wetland crossing. If I'm missing something,
that's how I see it as well.
Yeah. So I guess what we're looking for though is mostly the alternatives analysis from Patrick Seacamp is the main thing we want to review. And I know that you have it right now, Dave, but I guess maybe we could figure out a packet that includes a condensed, I don't know. It's too much information. I don't know what other additional information we would like.
Dave, do you have
I'd want to see the full report.
But we have the full.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying.
It's just a couple pages.
Yeah.
Do you have the date on that, just so I can wrap my head around it, that letter?
The date from Seacamp, November 11th, 2018.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay. So I guess we're amending the motion just slightly to include a review of that.
No, the motion only pertains to asking DES to hold.
I guess you're right. That's all we really need to send to DES. You're right. But I want to make sure we have.
What we do afterwards is our decision, has nothing to do with DES.
Yeah.
At this point.
But I'd want to just be clear what the next meeting would be. That's all. But that's outside of the thing. So we have a pending motion, and it's been seconded. Do we want to vote on it right now, and then we can entertain additional comments about what the next meeting would look like? Okay, because those are kind of two separate things. So all those in favor of the motion, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All those who oppose, say nay. None. The motion passes. That was, everyone voted, correct? 6-0. To hold the review for a 40-day hold on any decision on the permit by New Hampshire DES.
We'll have to get a quick email out or something tomorrow.
We'll be able to do that.
Just a notification, yeah.
Yep.
Sorry, Mr. Chair, sorry to interrupt here. And I may be jumping ahead, I just wanted some clarification. My understanding is that the discussion was to not address the AOT issues. I just want to know that because obviously we would need to make our engineers available for that meeting if there's going to be further discussion. It sounded like the commission was going away from that, but I just wanted to be sure so we can be prepared to get you the information you need.
Yeah. Anyone?
Yes, I'd love to.
I can speak as well, so you can go first.
Yeah, I agree. I don't want an AOT over AOT. I think that's not our place. I think right now it's really parsing out what in this jumble actually pertains to us and what we're actually trying to get out of it. I think from what I'm seeing, it's basically the proposed route versus an alternate route that looks like it has been hashed out in a couple of different processes, but we haven't seen the results. And because of that, what the environmental impacts through the wetlands would be of either or. Like we have basically one set of plans in front of us, but we have, comments from Peter Steckler as well as other pieces of material saying that there may be another alternative that would be less detrimental to then initiating a new crossing over the river. That's sort of where I'm at the moment, and if anyone else has anything else to add to that or take away, please fill me in.
I agree. That's what we want to look at. I mean, we have the ability to say, what is the least impactful impact, and someone's talked about an alternative route, and we need to see it, discuss it, and that's what we're doing.
I agree.
And because of that, I would also like to keep stormwater out of that discussion if at all possible, unless it's like pertaining directly to those entry points to the development.
The alternative would affect the design because of where the stormwater structures are and things like that. So it's a sort of a slippery slope, for lack of a better term. So I would like to, I also don't think we need to review the AOT, but I could see us getting it coming up.
That's a good answer, right? As far as an engineer goes, I think a lot of other developers have had engineers come to meetings, and it's been helpful.
We're happy to have.
I don't know if they would actually serve a purpose. We've had Eversources here, and they brought a team of 3 and one person talked, so could be useful. I can't really make that decision though.
Sure. No, I appreciate that. We're happy to have them go.
Okay, so there's the public hearing, the continued public hearing for this Well, will be next meeting,
Okay,
November 9th? Is that
I have a little
the date?
list going, yeah.
November 9th.
Just want to make sure that everybody in the public knows that, so, you know,
Yeah, we will,
so they know what the right date is and so they can be here.
yep, we will notice it as we do and post the packet as we do. That's all available. And from what I understand, we're still in person only for the time being. I have no idea if that would change in a month. So that'll have to be something we check in on before, but I don't see it changing. But I don't know. I don't really know what goes on here.
We'll fit it in.
We'll fit it in.
It's a priority.
Okay. Thank you guys for your time. Thank you for everyone. No, this is not an easy topic and we don't make these decisions lightly.
Mark, just out of curiosity on this one, do you think by next meeting we'll have fish and game recommendations?
I can't say for sure, but
Yeah, it was just-
I'll certainly reach out to them, see they are just buried in,
So slow.
for a variety of reasons, just with all the activity there is and changing the rules and regulations regarding their work. They are just completely buried in applications, so.
Okay, I think it'd just be nice to have.
Yeah, I'll certainly work on it.
Okay.
Anything else?
I think that was I still have a lot more, but yeah, we'll wait till next meeting.
Okay, all right.
Same shirt?
I know, we're out of the plan.
All right.
No, but we're all wearing plaid.
I know, why didn't we?
Get the memo.
There's a plaid memo.
You want the copy, please?
Thank you.
Thank you, guys.
Appreciate it.
Thank you, Mark.
And you have.
Do we want to end or do we have stamina for some other minor things?
I don't have stamina.
Okay.
Mr. Chair, I think I'm fading a bit. I wasn't even coming tonight.
Yeah, I know, Bill. Thank you so much for coming. I know this has been a lot.
Probably a poor choice of words on my part.
Is there anything pressing out of the business?
What was this for?
This is my first time back.
What was this for, Choice of Words? You were a dead horse. Yeah, I know, that was a rough one.
Changing date and the watch.
Yes. Is that this Saturday?
Yeah.
The Skywatch,
Oh,
is that what you're talking about?
Yeah.
That was canceled. Skywatch has been canceled.
It's not Saturday?
The official memo.
The official memo from Kristen, they were hoping, from what I understand, it was pending some change in COVID, which if you've been watching the numbers is sort of flat, so there's no change in COVID, so
So you have to take your own telescope out,
yes, I know.
set it out on the sidewalk or somewhere.
Exactly. That's the major thing. There was a request for
And the research?
some other things, but I don't know. Maybe we can just table them for next month.
We probably should take up the $3,000.
Yeah, is that possible to get?
Yeah.
through?
Why don't we do this? So it's actually $4,855 from the Conservation Fund. There's an error on the agenda
That's right.
for the,
Matter of fact, I remember.
for the Phase 1B archaeological investigation. So if, I guess, I don't know if we need to talk about it, but it seems like we're in support of this additional work for the Rains Barn, and it can be funded through the Conservation Fund. So I guess I will motion that we approve to expend this $4,855 from the Conservation Fund for the archaeological investigation that's needed out there.
Seconded.
Okay, all those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Okay, the motion passes.
Just for the record, Don wasn't here on that vote.
Don was not here on that, but everyone else voted. I think we can table everything else.
Can I make a quick comment, Mr. Chair?
Yeah.
As it relates to rains, we are having a subcommittee meeting this Thursday morning at 8:30. You guys are all welcome to join.
Okay.
But we will be talking about, where we're at and other updates with the property, so.
Excellent, that's great to hear. So there's this Thursday, there's a subcommittee meeting, and that may be posted or not. There are some other minor items here, but we'll address them the next meeting, including the bog bridge. So with that, I guess I will motion to adjourn.
I'll second.
All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All those opposed? All right, meeting is adjourned.
Thank you for tuning in to Exeter TV. Exeter TV is the town's public and government access channels, available on Comcast channels 98 and 22. Channel 98 is your channel. If you have an idea for a program, want to host your own talk show, or submit a film, we're here to get your content on television. On Channel 22, we bring you live and replay coverage of government meetings and other town updates. A third channel, Blue Hawk Media, is operated by SAU 16 and can be found on Channel 13, with all your school sports, events, and meetings. You can watch Exeter TV online at exeternh.tv, Apple TV, and on Roku. Find us on social media for extra content. Subscribe to our YouTube channel and hit the bell to get notified about live streams and new content. Tune in to our platforms every other Friday to watch the Exeter Biweekly Report, with recaps of recent events, updates from town departments, and messages from nonprofits in your area. If you head to our website, exeternh.tv, we invite you to sign up to our newsletter to receive monthly updates about new content, upcoming meetings, and more. We'd like to thank you for taking the time to watch Exeter TV and hope that you tune in to our other content as well.